welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Katie, I'm an illustrator and artist, and today I'm going to be running through weeks 10 and 11 of my daily illustration challenge. So if you're new to my channel, then you might not know that I've been drawing 6 days a week for the past 11 weeks, and every couple of weeks I do a video on my YouTube channel and just talk a little bit about the art that I've created, talk a bit about the styles and what I'm learning, and share with you my thoughts behind each piece. I tend to ramble a bit in these videos, so hopefully this one will be a little bit shorter, and we're just going to jump straight in. Day 55, which you might have seen already if you saw my most recent video last Sunday, is this frog painting. And I created this one with acrylic ink and using that for the first time, and then I did the frog and the water lilies on top in gouache. I was a little bit nervous about using acrylic ink because it's a brand new medium, but I'm really pleased with how this came out. There's definitely a lot for me to learn with this medium because I think it would work really well with more layers. But I really like the gouache over the top, and I'm glad that I added on the pencil details onto the water lilies as well. This was a Peachtober prompt, and this prompt was obviously frog, and I thought it would just go really well with the colour of acrylic ink which I bought from London, and I haven't ever drawn or painted a frog before, so I used a reference and I'll pop that down below as well in the description box. But overall I really like the colour palette and I think this was successful. For day 56 I actually created 2 paintings and attempted to work on both of them at the same time. So one of them is in the smaller Talon sketchbook, and then the other one is in my larger sketchbook, and that's this one. So I basically did the same view, and I'm really pleased with these. It definitely taught me that I'm not very good at working on 2 things at the same time. Like, I didn't switch as much as I thought. I basically just worked on the large one first, and then once I'd done that one I moved on to the second one. But it was really interesting to see how I learnt stuff from the first one and applied it to the second. So for example, I really like the texture which I did in the first one, and so I applied it to this one, and the same with the lines here, which I again did in the first and then liked it so much I applied it into this one. So I actually think that this one is my favourite of the 2, even though obviously it's like the same colours and the same layout. This one just feels nicer to me. It's a bit brighter, and I think I zoomed in a little bit more and I think it works better with the layout. I also added on the pink, which if you've watched my other videos you know that I'm fond of adding. And yeah, I learnt a lot with these 2, and it's definitely something that I want to take forward. I know a lot of people, a lot of artists use like warm-ups, and they will create some art first and then they'll go on to their painting, which isn't something that I do. I usually just go straight into it. But I can definitely see from this trying to do 2 that it would be beneficial, so maybe something when I have more time to try out. Day 57 is back in the smaller Talon sketchbook, and I've really been enjoying using this one. And I created these birds using gouache and mixed media, and I really like the simplicity of this one. I like that it goes over the whole spread. I was a little bit unhappy that I didn't go right down to the bottom, but I actually think it works really well now that I've added in the text just there, which is a little bit more about the birds from the reference book where I took these from. This was one of those where the base layer of the colours looked really awful, and I'll pop a picture on the screen so you can see how it started, because the details layer on this one really saved it, and overall I'm quite pleased with how it turned out in the end. It's always surprising to me how much the details layer, or how much I rely on the details layer with my artwork, because if I stopped with the base layer and thought most of the time I think it looks rubbish, and leave it at that, then obviously I feel like I wouldn't be a very good artist. But actually when I then do the second layer and add more on top, I can see how the art improves, and so that's definitely the way that I work rather than doing it all in one go. So this one's pretty simple, pretty basic, but a nice one to fill a spread in the sketchbook. Day 58 is this quick little sunset painting. And this one was deliberately to practice doing gradients in gouache. And I'm really pleased with the colour palette of this one. I really like the pinks with the greens. I definitely still need to practice the gradients because you can see like a line here where I didn't quite smooth it out enough. But this piece definitely has a softness to it and I really like that. These aren't colours that I would normally go for, but I was really taken by the reference picture I saw on Pinterest, and it just feels really soft and calm, and it was definitely nice and peaceful to paint as well. I added on some details right at the bottom using some brighter coloured pencils, which again is a colour palette which I don't usually use, with the purples and the oranges and the pinks. So for this quick little one, I was quite pleased with how it came out, but definitely need to practice gradients with gouache a little bit more. Day 59, again in the Talon sketchbook, and that was this little house on the river which I drew from a Pinterest reference. I was a bit stumped with what to draw on this day, and my go-to is usually Pinterest just to get an idea, and I was really taken by this reference image. I really like the way that the house sits on the water with like the water all around it in the background. It's on its own little island, and the colours really looked autumnal to me. I wasn't pleased with it once I'd done it, but now I'm looking back at it, I think it's okay. I definitely liked it more once, again, I'd added on some of the details, because when I was doing it, it was supposed to be a quick one. These little like gouache ones take a lot more time than I expect. And so once I'd done like the first layer, I really wasn't expecting much to come from this. But after I added on like the little details with the railings and things, I think it really came together, and I really like the colour palette of this one. I also added on this little tree sketch underneath, which I want to try and fill the page up, but I've still got this big blank bit here and also this page here. So I definitely need to come back and fill this one up. Quite a simple one and definitely not anything groundbreaking in the technique, but I do like the colours. Day 60 was the end of week 10, and I definitely find myself feeling a bit less inspired by the end of each week, and that was definitely the case with this one. So I created quite a few different things on this day, really quick ones, and I wasn't happy with any of them, but this one was the best of the bunch, and this was just done with Neocolor crayons and coloured pencils, and it's really very basic, and I'm not like super proud of it. I had to create some art, and so this is what I came up with. But interestingly, this one was actually featured on Creative Boom. So after I posted this one, which I don't think is very good and I wouldn't normally put it on my grid, I had a DM on Instagram from Creative Boom and they wanted to put it onto their Instagram page. And so I guess it's just a lesson that even if you don't think your art is great, it might resonate with other people and they might like it more than you do. I always find that the work which I like least, or that I don't think is my best work, always does better on Instagram and always gets more likes, which is really interesting. And so even if you don't like something, then it's worth putting it out there. And I think that's something that I've learned from this daily Instagram challenge, is that just because I don't like it doesn't mean other people won't. So I guess one of the things that I do like about this one, again, is the colour palette, and like I did experiment a bit with the pink and the turquoise in the background, but definitely not something that I would want to make a print of or anything, and just a piece of art that I had to create because I'm trying to create every day. It is quite rare that I create something which I really don't like, and obviously this was the best of the bad bunch. I'm still conscious about what I put up there. I don't want to put any old thing, but I'm glad I was still able to be creative that day, even if in my mind it wasn't successful. So after I took the Saturday off, after like feeling uninspired at the end of that week, I started week 11 on a really strong point and created this painting which I'm really proud of. So this is day 61, and I actually filmed this process, but that's a Patreon exclusive, so I did a real-time painting process, and I will put some clips up so you can see how it started. But I'm so proud of how this one came out. Again, it started off with like the base shapes and looking a bit of a mess, but it really came together when I added on all the details, and that was done with Neocolor crayons and Prismacolor pencils. This just feels like the kind of art that I want to create. It feels kind of messy, but there's a lot of life to it, which is what I'm always trying to strive for. I'm really liking the colours. It feels very autumnal. I really love drawing houses, so I'm glad that that one went well. The only thing that I'm not pleased with is the tree which I added here. I think I preferred the painting before that was added on, and like my patrons can hear my thought process when I'm doing that and how to try and fix it. And the best time to join my Patreon is the 1st, which is tomorrow. So if you did want to join for November, then tomorrow is your best bet if you want to see like more behind the scenes and real-time processes of my larger paintings like this. So this feels kind of like a children's book, which I really like. I really like the texture and the like loose marks that I made, and I wasn't expecting it to be so successful. But I found this image on Zillow, which I think is like the American version of Rightmove. And I was just randomly browsing it and I found this house and I decided to draw it, and I'm so glad. But yeah, I'm really pleased with how this one came out and I hope you like it too. Day 62 is in the Talon sketchbook, and it's another Still Here, Still Life challenge, which I have done a few times previously on this daily art challenge. And to me, this one was quite experimental, and it's not like the greatest artwork I've ever done. It was really quick, but this has done really well on Instagram. So again, like I say, the ones which I don't think are great always do better. And there's definitely a roughness to this which I really like. Obviously I'd just done this one the day before, and so I was still really enjoying the really rough loose marks, and you can definitely see that in this spread. I really like the texture and the colours on the apples, and yeah, it's very loose and very basic really. I'm glad I added on the cow because the milk bottle in the reference image was quite plain, so I think that adds a lot of like humour and character to it. And then I just filled in all the background space with blue, which again I think works really nicely. This one is quite basic, but I really like how bright it is. It's very different to all the other things I've done in this sketchbook, which are very landscape and sort of rural scenes. So I really enjoyed this one, and I think I would like to do more like this in the future, just to see how like the rough style translates into still life. Day 63 is this tiny little pumpkin, just because I wanted to do something really seasonal, and obviously Halloween was coming up, and this was one of those where I don't have that long and just need to create something quick. And I'm really pleased with how this one came out. I think it's super cute. I like the addition of the white details, which you might have seen me doing in some of the other illustrations, such as the frog. There's not much texture on this one in terms of adding it on with the pencils like I usually do, and I just created the shading on the pumpkin using different shades of the orange in gouache. But I think it's really cute. I'm glad I added on the little smiley face on the pumpkin. It's a really basic one and it was quite quick, but I think it was quite successful, and I'm pleased with this one as well. On day 64, I received an order I'd made on Cult pens, where I bought a few more Tombos, and so I really wanted to try them out in my Talon sketchbook and create something using the colours that I bought. So this is the result of it, and it was the perfect reference for the colours which I bought. So I got a few more greens, and then this really nice orangey mustard yellow colour, this pale lilac and a lighter blue. I also bought an Ecoline brush pen, which is my first try of that kind of pen, and I was really impressed with it, and I'm quite pleased with how this came out. It's obviously very rough and ready. I did this one mostly standing up just because I filmed it for a reel and it's kind of hard to get the angle, so it definitely isn't as neat as I would normally do it, but it definitely has like a quirkiness to it, and I'm really pleased with how the camper van came out considering I don't really draw vehicles at all. It obviously isn't perfect because it looks like it's floating and the shadow's a bit weird. And like it's definitely not my proudest thing in the sketchbook, but I think it came out okay and it served its purpose in terms of like trying out my new pens and things, and I'm really pleased with the pens that I did buy. Now that I've tried Tombos out, and I bought my first few when I went to London, and then obviously I enjoyed them so much I bought some more from Cult pens, and I can definitely see my collection growing even more. They're really great to lay down a really big block of colour, and I think that it works really well with my style of painting in terms of like I can use that as well as gouache paint, and then on top of that I can still layer my new colours and pencils. So I think they work really well in my process, and I'm probably going to get some more in the future. Day 65 is a single spread in the larger sketchbook, and this again was a prompt for Peachtober, which was sun. So this one was an experiment for me and definitely a reference photo which I would usually shy away from. I don't often do scenes like this. I usually do quite basic forest scenes, and this one was very foggy and misty, and I definitely experimented with using my usual techniques to try and recreate that atmosphere. The colour palette is really warm and autumnal, and I really like how that came out. And I am quite pleased with the technique I used for the foggy areas, and I used a lot more blending than I normally do. That was mostly done with the Prismacolor pencils and just a lot of blending with a sort of cream tone. It definitely helps distance the foreground with the middle ground. I don't love how the sun rays came out. I think I could have done that a lot nicer. Overall, this piece definitely gives me a really nice feeling. It feels very calm and serene. It still feels different for me in terms of like how I applied the paint and things. So I definitely think I can explore that a little bit more and try blending a little bit more in my future pieces. You can see at the front in the foreground I did add more texture and went with my usual style of like adding squiggly lines and things, and I think that definitely helps make the piece what it is because it's got that stark contrast from the foreground with the misty hills in the middle of the picture. So I definitely went with like an autumnal colour palette. I was definitely getting into like the October mood for these weeks. But it feels really warm and I'm really pleased with how that one came out, especially with the orange and the greens, which obviously is a colour combo which always does well. But yeah, this one just feels really warm and it was definitely a good experiment. Okay, so for the last one on week 11 and day 66 was this spread in my talent sketchbook. And again, I was feeling a little bit tired. It was at the end of the week. So this one isn't very grand, but it was definitely an experiment in terms of applying the paint. So one of the things which I've been trying, and like I did on the still life, and also the birds, was where I'm blocking in the shapes first and then going on top with the details. And I really wanted to test that out with something so intricate like this fern. What I did for this was just put a really big basic shape with the green gouache paint, and then I went over the top with the green colour pencil and just sort of went around the shape and added in all the details of the ferns. And I really love how this came out. I think it was a really interesting experiment. It's obviously a very basic spread and you can see like I was quite refined on the shape of the paint on these leaves, so I don't think they work as well. I think this one works so nicely because you can see that it was a big blob of paint and then I added that over the top. And then the flowers are very sparse on the details, but I wanted to fill up that side of the spread. So although this one's quite basic, you can still see like the autumnal theme I was doing that week. And I definitely feel like I've learned something with all the artwork that I've created so far, that I really like the technique of laying down that shape first and then going in with the pencil on top, rather than doing the line work first and then filling it in with the colours. I think this one was quite successful and a nice way to end week 11. That's the end of the roundup for week 10 and 11, and I'm really pleased with the artwork that I created. Obviously you know that my favourite is going to be that little house in the forest in my very big sketchbook, but I'd love to know which is your favourite that you've seen today and pop them down in the comments. If you want to stay up to date and see my paintings day by day, then the best place to find me is on Instagram, where I do post real time, but I'll also be back in a couple of weeks to do my roundup of week 12 and 13. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Sunday with a new video. See you later.